My name is Sister Magdalena Perro, and I died on the morning of October 18th, 2024. I remember the exact time, 5:36 a.m., because I was on my knees in prayer in the quiet chapel of St. Joseph's Convent in the Galilee region when I felt the pain in my chest. It was sudden, sharp, like lightning cutting through my ribs. I collapsed forward, my cheek pressing into the worn wooden pew, and then everything faded into silence. No sirens, no voices, just silence. But I was still aware. At first, I thought I had only fainted. I could still see, though not with my physical eyes. I was above myself, observing with terrifying clarity as my sisters gathered around my body, shouting for help. One ran to call an ambulance, while another cradled my head. I tried to speak, to let them know I was all right, but no sound came from my lips. I realized, slowly and dreadfully, that I was no longer in my body. Then came the shift. It felt like the air around me began to vibrate. The colors faded into a pure, almost blinding light. The walls of the chapel dissolved, and I was pulled upward, not by force, but as if gravity itself had reversed. I was rising into something vast and endless. I felt both awe and terror, like standing at the edge of the universe and sensing that every secret was about to be revealed. And then I saw him. Jesus stood before me, serene, radiant, and unsearchably holy. His eyes locked with mine, and instantly I knew two things. He had always loved me, and he was about to show me something I was completely unprepared for. His presence didn't burn, but it did pierce. There was no room to hide anything, not fear, not pride, not even the smallest doubt. He simply saw everything. "Magdalena," he said, not with his mouth, but with a voice that thundered inside my soul. "You must watch. What you see is not for you alone. You must return and tell them." The words frightened me. Return. I had died. I could feel it. I didn't want to return. I had no desire for the brokenness of the world. But I also knew that what he was about to show me was urgent, more urgent than anything I had ever witnessed in my life. The light shifted, and I suddenly stood over what appeared to be the Middle East. It was not a physical map, yet I understood it instinctively. I could see the borders of Israel, the desert winds of Iran, and nations all around shifting like grains of sand in a storm. And then I saw fire, explosions, chaos, but none of it was political. None of it was born of man alone. I saw shadows, spirits, moving behind leaders, whispering lies, inflaming vengeance, twisting truth into hatred. I saw angels wrestling them back, interceding desperately over cities I did not recognize. And Jesus said to me, "The world sees only flesh and power, but I see the battle for souls." He pointed toward a growing darkness hovering over the region. It pulsed like a living wound, expanding, blackening the sky. "What begins here," he said, "will ripple across the earth. It has begun already, but my people sleep." I tried to ask what it meant, whether war was coming, whether nuclear fire would fall, but he didn't answer in specifics. Instead, he showed me hearts. Men and women in government buildings, in mosques, in churches and homes. He showed me the hatred building silently, the pride, the manipulation. And then he showed me tears, his tears. He wept not for buildings, but for the souls lost to deception. He showed me women shielding their children under broken roofs. I saw young boys forced into ideologies. I saw Christians afraid to speak the truth. But most of all, I saw silence, paralyzing, dangerous silence in the face of evil. "Magdalena," Jesus said again, this time gently, "my church must wake. They must pray, not with performance, but with pain. They must see what you have seen. For when the fire comes, only those with light inside will endure the darkness around them." And just like that, I began to fall, descending back into my body, weeping even as my lungs gasped for air again. But I was no longer the same. I don't know how long I was standing there, floating, really, watching them work on my body. But I wasn't panicked. There was this strange stillness in me, like I knew I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. My body was beneath me, lifeless, pale, surrounded by men in blue gloves and blinking machines, but I felt more alive than I ever had before. Lighter, clearer, as though I had shed 100-pound coat of noise and ambition and pretense. And then it happened. A light opened up in the space above me, not like anything I'd ever seen. Not artificial. Not even the sun on a perfect Greek afternoon could rival this light. It had warmth, yes, but it also had something deeper, awareness. It wasn't just light, it was love. Love that knew me. Fully. Every lie I ever told. Every deal where I crushed someone just to make the quarterly numbers. Every time I chose business over my wife. Over my children. And still I was being drawn in. Then he appeared. Jesus. Not in some theatrical robe or with lightning behind him. No, he was real. And he was radiant in a way that didn't burn my eyes, but stripped away every excuse I had ever crafted. I didn't even need to speak. He knew everything. But he let me talk anyway. I didn't mean to waste it. I stammered. He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me with this gaze that broke me open. Then finally, with a voice that was both thunder and whisper, he said, "Jonathan, you had everything, but you possessed nothing. You were surrounded by riches, but your soul was bankrupt. It crushed me. I wanted to fall to my knees, but in this place I had no knees. I had only soul and shame. Not because he condemned me, he didn't, but because in the face of that kind of love, my life felt so grotesquely self-centered. He showed me scenes, birthday parties where I was on a phone call instead of holding my daughter. Christmas mornings where my gifts were expensive but my presence was absent. My son's soccer game I missed to close a billion-dollar merger. And then my wife, crying alone in the shower, praying to a God she wasn't sure was listening, begging for me to come back, not from a business trip, but from wherever I had gone in my heart. You pursued the currency of man, Jesus said, but you never pursued me. You made gold your God, success your scripture, and your name the altar you worshipped at. I wept. I didn't care about pride anymore. I didn't care if the world remembered me as a business legend. I just wanted a second chance to love them right, to put their hearts above my empire, to say I'm sorry and mean it, to walk away from boardrooms and back into my home. If only it wasn't too late. Jesus looked at me again, and this time his face carried a strange mixture of sorrow and hope. "It doesn't have to end this way," he said. "Please," I whispered, "let me go back." I'll make it right. I'll sell everything. I'll find them. I'll love them the way I should have from the beginning. There was a silence, and then a nod, and with that, the light began to fold back. I felt myself falling, slowly, gently, back through layers of reality, through a veil of grace. And then, just like that, I gasped. The ICU monitor beeped erratically. A nurse screamed. My eyes opened. I was back, but I was no longer the man who had died. I was someone reborn, with nothing but a vision, a mission, and a desperate desire to love what I had so long overlooked. When Jesus touched my shoulder, a cascade of light and sorrow fell over me like rain. We stood, if you could even call it standing, before what looked like a giant vault suspended in the air with no walls around it. This vault wasn't physical. It was made of memories, memories I had buried, forgotten, or tried to. And Jesus, with infinite tenderness, said, "This is what money did to your soul, Jonathan." The vault opened, not with creaks or hinges, but with a silent ripple like a curtain being pulled back in a dream. Inside, I didn't see gold or bonds or banknotes. I saw my daughter's 10th birthday party without me. She was blowing out candles while holding back tears because Daddy had to close a merger. I saw my wife weeping in the back seat of a limo after another gala, alone in her diamond necklace, wondering if her husband even saw her anymore. I saw my brother, who once called to borrow a small amount to get through medical school, being told by my assistant that Mr. Vale is unavailable at this time. Every one of those memories, some long buried, pierced me, but it wasn't guilt alone that overwhelmed me. It was the truth Jesus revealed about each moment. He showed me what I had the power to do and chose not to. He showed me what each no cost not just them, but me. In one memory, I saw myself walking past a homeless man. I had just stepped out of my Maybach, checking the stocks on my phone. The man had asked for food, not money. Jesus played the moment slowly, frame by frame. I saw the invisible angels recording not just my actions, but my motives. I had thought I was doing fine, donating to hospitals, sponsoring art museums. But Jesus whispered, "You gave where it brought you praise, not where it brought others hope." Then came the most crushing vision of all. A hallway, endless, lined with portraits of people I had hurt through negligence, employees laid off without a second thought, a friend who took his life after I publicly humiliated him in a board meeting, a pastor I mocked for suggesting I tithe. Each portrait glowed with silent disappointment, but there was no accusation in their eyes, only sorrow, sorrow that I had missed the point. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why show me now when it's too late?" Jesus turned to me, and I'll never forget what he said. "It's not too late, because I love you more than you've ever hated yourself." Those words, simple, clear, absolute, tore through the shame like light bursting through a prison wall. I collapsed into his arms. He didn't scold. He didn't list my failures. He simply held me. The King of Kings held me, the man who had bought and sold companies like toys. And in his embrace, I felt something I had never felt before, freedom. He then said, "Now I will show you what money could have done." With a wave of his hand, we stood on a street in India. A child was eating a hot meal handed to him by a Christian charity. Then we were in a prison in Colombia. A man was reading the Bible I had helped translate but never knew existed. Then a house in Detroit. A single mother prayed in the bedroom I could have paid to build. "Jonathan," he said, "money is a tool. You made it your God, but it was meant to serve love, not replace it." Tears flowed down my face like rivers. I wanted to go back. I wanted to fix everything. And somehow, I knew that desire wasn't just guilt. It was grace. Then Jesus said something I will never forget, and I pray no one ever forgets. "You were never meant to be owned by what you own." We began to move again, back toward the light, back toward the veil between death and life. But this time I was not afraid. I knew that if I returned, my life had to look nothing like it once did. The vault had been opened. The truth had been seen. And love, real, divine, unshakable love, had reached me in my ruins. When I woke up in the hospital, I didn't recognize myself, not in the mirror, not in my spirit, not even in the way I breathed. My chest ached from the defibrillator jolts, and I could barely speak, but inside, something eternal had shifted. The arrogance, the ambition, the weight of dominance I had once worn like a badge, all of it had dissolved. I didn't feel like a titan of industry anymore. I felt like a man pulled from the edge of fire, cradled by mercy. I felt like a child who had finally met his father. My daughter Madison was there when I opened my eyes. She hadn't spoken to me in 7 years. Her hair was longer, curled like her mother's used to be. She was holding my hand and crying, "Dad, you're back." That sentence alone shattered me more than the heart attack ever could. In that moment, I didn't think about stocks or real estate portfolios. I thought about the first time I held her as a baby, the day I missed her graduation for a board meeting, the voicemail I ignored when she begged me to come home for Christmas. I sobbed, not a composed cry, the kind of sob that shakes a man to his core. I clung to her hand like it was the only thread tethering me to this new world. Because it was. She could have walked away, and I wouldn't have blamed her. But instead, she stayed. That's what love does. That's what I never understood before Jesus showed me what I had been trading away for power and praise. The doctors were amazed I had survived. 23 minutes flatlined. They said, "We have no explanation. You were gone." But I knew. I was gone, and Jesus sent me back. Not because I deserved it, but because I had been entrusted with something bigger than all my billions. A warning, a mission, a second chance. The days that followed were not glamorous. I was weak. My motor functions took time to come back. But I didn't care. I didn't ask for a private room or call my lawyers. I asked for my ex-wife, for my son, for Madison, and I asked for a Bible. It was the first time I had read the words of Jesus without filtering them through strategy or intellect. This time, I read them with a trembling soul. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I used to quote that in speeches, but I never understood it. Not until I stood beside Jesus and watched my treasure burn in the eternal light of truth. My investments meant nothing in that place. My penthouse meant nothing. The time I withheld from people who loved me, that meant everything. When I was discharged, I didn't return to the penthouse. I went to Madison's apartment. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, no doorman. And it was paradise. We cooked scrambled eggs in a pan with a loose handle. We watched a movie on a second-hand couch. She laughed, And I listened, not to respond, not to control, but just to love her, the way Jesus loved me. I spent weeks reaching out to every person I had ever wronged. I called former employees I had fired without cause. I donated anonymously to struggling single mothers whose husbands once worked under me. I transferred ownership of 2 companies to charities focused on orphaned children. And then I made the hardest decision of all. I started selling my empire. People thought I was insane. Wall Street speculated that I was hiding a diagnosis. Friends thought I had joined a cult, but I had tasted eternity. I had seen the fire that licked at my heels and the light that lifted me out of it. I had been bought back with love, and now I could not live the same. I walked into my bank and told them I wanted to liquidate. Everything, they asked. Everything, I said. I'm keeping just enough to live and serve. The rest belongs to God. A financial advisor flew in from Europe to dissuade me. Mr. Vale, you could create generational wealth. Legacies are built on foundations like yours. But I had already seen the truth. Legacies built on wealth will die with the world. Legacies built on love live forever. As I gave away the billions, a strange thing happened. I grew richer, not in assets, but in soul. The more I gave, the more I received peace, clarity, healing. I saw tears turn to joy. I watched broken families find homes. I witnessed people praising God for miracles I never deserved to be part of. I wasn't a businessman anymore. I was a steward, a servant, a child learning how to love. Jesus didn't just give me a second chance. He gave me the gift of purpose. And every morning now, I wake up not wondering how the markets are doing, but how I'm doing in the kingdom of heaven. Who can I bless today? Who can I forgive? Who needs to know that they, too, can be redeemed? Because if Jesus could reach me, a billionaire whose heart was colder than his gold, he can reach anyone. The days following my return were an avalanche of awakening. When I opened my eyes in the ICU, the first face I saw was Melissa, my daughter, the one whose birthday I missed 12 years in a row because I was always closing deals. She looked older than the last memory I had of her, but her eyes still held the softness I remembered from when she was a child and would wait by the window, watching for my car. Only this time, her eyes were swollen from crying. "Dad," she whispered, almost unsure whether it was really me. I tried to speak, but the oxygen mask muffled my voice. So I reached out, weakly, trembling like an old man, and held her hand. And in that single touch, years of emotional distance seemed to close. Not because of anything I had done, but because Jesus had already begun the repair from the inside. In the hospital over the next few weeks, I didn't speak much. Not because I couldn't, but because I had so much to unlearn. I was listening to Melissa, to my ex-wife, Ilana, who visited once and stood at the foot of my bed in tears, unable to speak, to the nurses and techs who treated me like a human being and not a checkbook. And most of all, I was listening to the quiet voice of the Holy Spirit inside me, whispering truth, correcting years of ego, peeling off the layers of greed and coldness like dead skin. I couldn't go back to who I was. My recovery was fast, almost suspiciously fast. My doctors called it miraculous. One cardiac specialist told me he had never seen a man come back from 23 minutes of cardiac death with full cognition, no memory loss, and no neurological impairment. I just smiled because I knew. I was no longer just a man walking around in a miracle. I was the miracle. Not because of anything I did, but because of who I met on the other side. The media caught wind of my story. Billionaire dies and comes back religious. Headlines splashed across websites. Jonathan Vail from Fortune to Faith. I refused interviews. I didn't need a new brand. I needed a new life. So I began. First, I sold off the 6-bedroom penthouse in Manhattan. Gone. Then the vineyard in Tuscany. The 6-car garage filled with toys I bought just to feel something. Auctioned, with proceeds donated anonymously to orphanages, battered women's shelters, and Christian ministries I once mocked. I gave away stock options and trust fund assets. I began funding small businesses run by single moms and immigrants. I supported families who were drowning in medical debt. I paid off mortgages for pastors who lived humbly and never asked for anything. People called me insane. Why are you giving it all away? Because I already had everything, and it almost killed me. One of the most powerful moments came when I visited a homeless shelter I had driven past hundreds of times on my way to board meetings. This time I walked in, sat beside a man named Lyle who had lost everything after his wife died. I didn't tell him who I was. I just listened. I didn't give him a check. I gave him my attention. Later, when the manager recognized me and asked why I was there, I simply said, to repent. Because repentance isn't just about confessing sin, it's about turning around, about walking in a new direction, about leaving the kingdom of self for the kingdom of heaven. That was the path Jesus gave me, and I was going to walk it, even if it took me the rest of my life to repair what I broke. My daughter and I had lunch every Sunday. I showed up at her apartment with flowers, books, prayers. She wasn't sure how to receive me at first. "I don't need your money, Dad," she said once. "I didn't bring money," I replied. "I brought me." Finally, we laughed. Then we cried. I reconnected with Alana too. Not romantically, but with reverence. I apologized, not in a PR-crafted apology, but the trembling kind that comes from a man who has stood before Jesus and seen his soul. "Will you forgive me for being a stranger in our marriage?" I asked her one day at a quiet cafe. She said yes, and that yes cracked something open in me that money never could. People didn't understand me when I came back. I expected some confusion, of course. What billionaire suddenly gives away his fortune and starts visiting homeless shelters and orphanages? What hedge fund titan cancels his own board meetings so he can cook dinner with his estranged daughter or spend Sunday mornings kneeling in the back pew of a modest church in Queens? My old colleagues thought I was insane. The media speculated I'd had a mental breakdown. But I didn't care. I knew I'd seen the eternal. I had stood in front of Jesus, and when you look into his eyes and see what matters, everything else fades away. I started speaking publicly, not as a motivational speaker, but as a man who had tasted both death and redemption. I told crowds in suits and ties, in recovery centers, in college auditoriums and cathedrals. I died, and Jesus showed me what money does to your soul. I had everything, and I was spiritually bankrupt. Don't let the world define wealth for you. The only account that matters is the one you build in heaven. I didn't preach fear. I didn't try to manipulate anyone. I simply shared the truth. I shared the moment when Jesus looked at me, not with rage, but with sorrow, and said, "You traded love for comfort. You traded people for numbers. But I'm giving you a second chance." Some people wept when they heard it. Some mocked me. But some came alive. Some left their jobs and started nonprofits. Some forgave their spouses. Some called their children for the first time in years. The fruit began to multiply, not in dollars, but in eternity. My daughter, Isabel, hugged me one night after volunteering at a shelter we now run together. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You're not the same man who left us, Dad, but I'm so glad you came back." That moment was worth more than every cent I ever made. And then there were the quiet nights when I'd sit alone on the rooftop of the modest home I bought after selling my penthouse, staring at the stars. I'd remember the light, the realm of peace. I'd remember Jesus, and the way his presence burned away every illusion. I'd remember how close death came and how quickly grace followed. One night, as I prayed under the moonlight, I heard his voice again, not booming, but quiet and familiar. "Jonathan, you've learned to treasure what I treasure." It wasn't a reward. It was a reassurance. I was finally living in alignment with heaven. Now I wake up every day asking a simple question. How can I love today? That's my compass. Not the market. Not the news. Just that love. If you're hearing my story today, I'm not here to guilt you or impress you. I'm here to plead with you. Don't wait for death to teach you what life is for. Examine your soul. Ask yourself, what have I built? Whom have I served? What will remain when my name fades from the headlines and my bank accounts vanish into the dust? You don't need to be a billionaire to lose your soul, and you don't need to die to find it again. Jesus is waiting. Let him in. If this story touched your heart, if it made you question what really matters, leave a comment below. Share what spoke to you most. And if you've been chasing the wrong kind of wealth, let today be your turning point. Tell us below, what are you ready to surrender? What are you ready to treasure again? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. Let's help each other build something eternal.